Coming to paperback and Kindle this fall, E-Steam Blast from the Past. Hell's aspiring angel takes on her demonic doppelganger in this time-traveling, action-packed E-Steam series adventure. Pre-order your copy of E-Steam Blast from the Past on Kindle with a bonus E-Steam comic going for the paperback this fall. I got a chance to take a look at Milestone Returns Zero after one of my Facebook friends told me that the comic was available for free. Now, Milestone Returns Zero is meant to reintroduce comic fans to the Milestone universe that was created all the way back in 1993. Now, the Milestone universe was a universe of black superheroes, and it was a great place because for the first time we were getting to see not only black superheroes in their own universe from a mainstream comic company, but we were getting to see a diversity of thought from these heroes who had different social views and different political views. And that was one of the great things about the Milestone universe was we saw that the black community wasn't a monolith. We saw that the black community was a rich tapestry of different people, a rich tapestry of different viewpoints, and a rich tapestry of different people with different ideas. And I remember going to college back in 1993 and anticipating picking up those issues of Hardware, Blood Syndicate, Icon, and Static, and I was really impressed with what I saw in those comics back in 1993. However, I wasn't really impressed with Milestone Returns Zero, and when I really looked at Milestone Returns Zero, I was really disappointed with a lot of what was presented in the pages of Milestone Returns Zero. Now, Reginald Hudlin was one of the writers of this Milestone Returns Zero. I think he wrote most of the book except for page 14 and 15, which are written by Greg Pak. And this Return Zero, really, it comes across as really as flat as some of the weaker stories in the Milestone universe. Because when I started to look at the pages of this whole book, it just came across as really two-dimensional, and the characterizations came across as really, really flat. Now, the first page of the book gives us a recap of the origin of Icon, and this recap of the origin of Icon really just, it really is disappointing because they omit certain details as related to Raquel and the people she's involved with. They go out here and omit details as related to how Raquel and met Augustus, and they really omit a lot of the details for everybody. So if you're a new reader and you've never really experienced these characters, you really don't get the full story. Now, I know this is a teaser book, but I wanted a little bit more. And it seems like they take out all of the key elements of the Icon story and they replace it with a lot of what I see to be a lot of what people were warning me about, a lot of social justice and identity politics. Because on a page where Icon is addressing the United Nations, we get a really condescending tone as related to him being this alien from another planet, and then him talking down to all of these people. And I really was not happy to see that. I really liked the original Icon, which gave us the brother from another planet, and really showed us how he had to survive in this world as experiencing life as a black man. So I didn't like the fact that with the Icon story, we're starting to see this theme, as I saw throughout the book, of glossing over a lot of black culture. And instead of us getting black culture, we're starting to see a woke narrative being replacing it. Because when I looked at this book, I was like, one of the things that was great about the old Milestone was not only were we getting black heroes, but we were also getting a strong picture of black culture. And it seems like a lot of what is done in these new books erases a lot of the black culture and erases a lot of the things that made Milestone distinct. And we got that, again, diverse picture of the black community and saw that we weren't just one monolith, but we were different people with different viewpoints. And instead of that, we get your Augustus Freeman icon going out here talking down to the United Nations and coming across, again, it's really condescending, the way many of what people call SJWs do. And I wasn't happy to see that from these panels. Like there's one where he talks about love the mention of the word that makes you scoff. That's how backward you are. That's why when one of you tries to elevate your society with love, you kill them. So he has a picture of a black Jesus there, and that came across as really, I felt that that wasn't really a good thing to put in the story. I mean, the whole point of the icon character is he's looking at our culture from an outside perspective, but he also has compassion on people, and that was one of the traits that I really liked about the icon character that it was inspired partially to do with my Isis character. Was you have this goddess who's seeing humanity and she's coming from it and she's having compassion on them, but I didn't see anything. I just saw condescension in the icon reintroduction. Now, I also as I started to read it, they started to talk about these conspiracy theories and icon watching everybody, and I really didn't like that part because that really, as I saw it, was never really part of who the icon character was. And him having all these screens and watching people, and then that I didn't really like that at all because it just doesn't really fit who Augustus was, and it didn't fit his character. So he doesn't look very heroic doing that kind of stuff. It looks very, very troubling to me, and it's not a good direction. Now, the static reintroduction, that's where things really go off the rails, because instead of us getting a reintroduction to static that stays true to his origin, what we get is, again, another woke narrative looking to retell static story. So instead of us getting an objective origin that really fit what went on in inner city neighborhoods, we get a social justice retelling of Static's origin, where we have in the introductory panel Static talking about his father being this big, strong man. And I kind of found this image to be quite troubling because you got this guy holding up 20-pound bags of rice and groceries, helping out somebody. But that kind of reminded me of the Black Buck in some ways. Then it's contrasted with skinny Virgil, who's a bit of a nerd and always was a bit of a nerd. And the whole thing is, instead of us getting a picture of Virgil being the comic fan and the nerd he was, we get Virgil being asked by Daisy Hawkins, Frida Gorin fusion, which is what it looks like, because it looks like a mix of Daisy and Frida with this new girl, asking if he's coming to the protest. And that was never what the origin of Static was all about. Static was not going to a Black Lives Matter protest. No, he was bullied by white and black gang members, and he wound up going there with a gun to go after this white guy, Hot Streak, who had been bullying him. And that's why he did that, because it wasn't really Hot Streak. His name was Biz Money B. He was a wannabe black guy, and he was one of these white guys who wanted to be black, and he put on a hip-hop gimmick. And Virgil went to this gang thing, this rumble known as the Big Bang. And this is another troubling thing about Milestone Returns, is that it erases the Big Bang. The Big Bang, it was a major starting point for the entire Milestone universe, and in these pages of Static, they practically erase the Big Bang, which created most of the villains in the Milestone universe and many of the heroes in the Milestone universe. Now, the Big Bang being erased practically changes the Milestone universe dramatically, and the fact that they made this a Black Lives Matter protest, this just shows how it's more about identity politics than bringing these characters back and staying true to the characters, staying true to their stories, and staying true to their spirit. So I looked at that panel and I found it to be deeply troubling that Static is at a Black Lives Matter rally when that never happened in the original comics. And I found some of the panels of the bullies only being white males to also be quite troubling, because these are the things that people complain about as related to so-called SJW comics, and it really doesn't show good balance as related to the characterizations and the storytelling. So again, instead of us getting a picture of the characters that stays true to who these characters were, we're getting a woke narrative as related to them, and that's not something old-time veteran readers like myself want to see, and that's not something people who grew up with the Static Shock comic book want, not comic book, but TV show want to see. We don't really want to see this identity politics pushed as related to these Milestone characters. What we want to see is really great storytelling, and this revised origins in these comics is quite troubling, because instead of us getting the diversity of heroes, we're not getting anything but one monolithic narrative as related to these classic characters. So that was another problem I had with looking at the return of Icon and the return of Static. We're not getting any sort of diversity, because originally Icon was supposed to be representing the old school black elite. Hardware was supposed to be representing the new black male who had been well educated and professional. Static was the middle class. Rocket was the poor kid. And we got diversity of thought, but we're not getting that diversity of thought. Instead, we're getting all of this monolithic woke narrative as related to these characters. And all of these characters, again, are being presented with us as the black heroes versus the evil white man. And that's what I got from the panels from the Static origin that was retold, and as I see it, poorly revised. We're really not getting who this character is and what he's truly about. I mean, Static, when he's done well, is on a level of Spider-Man, but I'm not seeing anything as related to the Spider-Man that I knew, Peter Parker. I'm seeing a rehashed version of Spider-Man watered down like Miles Morales, and that's not the Spider-Man I would find to be quite compelling. Now, as this book goes on, we start to see Icon and Rocket watching these screens, and then we get this whole thing about Static possibly being hunted by this mysterious villain who sees an interracial couple walking down the street. He sees the black man and the white woman together, and he's watching them, and then he wants to go and attack them. Now, I found this scene to be, again, more of the pushing of the social justice narratives. So this really isn't really a good look for these Milestone characters. And to tell me that this guy is a villain because he doesn't like interracial dating, and then have Rocket talk about how he's racist, this isn't really good storytelling. Again, this is more identity politics, more social justice, and more really weak storytelling. I could see if you were going to introduce a new villain to me that was talking about his powers and talking about how he wanted to go out here and deal with these heroes. But to tell me that this guy was upset over interracial dating, that really isn't a good look for a first issue that a new reader is looking at and old veteran readers are looking at. Now, after introducing Static, we get a new character called Duo, who is based on an Asian man and an Asian woman. And this duo kind of reminds me of Zombie, the book that came out with Daniel, I think his name is David Kim or Daniel Kim, and how these two people are merged together. And this one kind of reminds me of Doom Patrol meets Fury of Firestorm, but I'm not seeing anything from the panels that really makes me say, hey, I really want to buy this. I mean, it looks kind of sort of interesting, but it doesn't look like something I would spend money on. But the book continues to go on, and again, we follow up with the Shadow Cabinet and Dharma at the end, and talking about conspiracies and conspiracy theories. But the overall book doesn't really have anything in it that makes you go, wow, I really am excited about this Milestone universe the way I was back in 1993. Yes, Milestone is back, but Milestone has some serious problems with its return. And the big problems I'm seeing from a creative perspective is that Milestone returned with not a focus on bringing these characters back true to who they are. It's back with a narrative of trying to pander to these social justice warriors, people who don't buy comics, because most black science fiction, fantasy fans, and people who collect comics, we wanted to see the classic Milestone characters brought back true to who they were, and we wanted to see their stories back the way we used to have them. Now, we didn't get that with this Returns. What we got was a reintroduction to the characters that brings them back in a social justice context. And from the way many of these social justice books have sold, this is not a good plan for bringing back Milestone. And the other big problem I have with the writing here is how two-dimensional it really is, because we're not really getting much as related to substance with the character development. We're not really getting much substance as related to the storytelling, and we're not getting much substance as related to making these heroes people we can care about. Because one of the rules that I learned from screenwriting is you have to answer 3 questions. Who is the main character? What do they want? What obstacles are in their way? And why should we care? And from Milestone Return Zero, there's not much to care about these characters. They really don't give you anything that shows you a reason to care enough to say, I want to put some money down on these characters and read their adventures. Outside of them just being black characters, there's not anything as related to the content of their characters that really makes them compelling. And that was one of the big drawbacks of the old Milestone run, was that the characters had that two-dimensionality and didn't get into that third dimension outside of Static and some issues of Icon. There really was not that third dimension of storytelling that we got in Chris Claremont and John Byrne's X-Men, or Marv Wolfman and George Perez's New Teen Titans, that made them fan favorites. The only character that had that third dimension was Static and Icon to a point, but a lot of the other characters, they were stuck in two-dimensionality, and that really prevented us from caring. Now, the other big problem over at Milestone that still continues to go on, looks like from this Returns issue, is the lack of bad guys. In this Returns, we get the bad guy, and he's supposed to be what looks like to be the evil white man. And that's not going to cut it with comics. And the reason why it's not going to cut it with comics is because you have to make a villain who is just as compelling as the hero. When you have compelling villains, they sell comics. And the reason why compelling villains sell comics is because villains drive the conflict, and the conflict is what makes us care to pick up the next issue to see how the hero is going to overcome these obstacles that are put in their way. So this Milestone Returns, it gave us, again, a nice reintroduction to the heroes, but it really didn't establish why these bad guys are a threat. And they didn't really establish but one bad guy, and that bad guy really looked like weak sauce, because this bad guy was just, oh, he's going after the interracial couple, but that's not enough to make people care, especially your core demographic of black readers. Now, if there was a black man and a black woman together and there was a menace coming after them, that would make the reader maybe possibly care, but that's still not enough there because the story, again, just wasn't strong enough to really grab the reader, and I wasn't really grabbed by what I saw in these pages. I really didn't see enough there to say, hey, I want to spend $4 on this. And I really didn't like a lot of the way that some of the characters were written and the way some of these characters' origins were retconned. Now, the other issue I had with Milestone Returns was with the costume design. Now, the original Milestone had some very strong visuals as related to the costumes, and some character designs like Icon, Static, and Rocket really popped. And that was one of the things I liked about Milestone in the beginning was the visuals were very strong and the costume designs were very bold. I mean, you got really strong colors as related to Icon with the red, the black, and the green. But with this new version of Icon, his costume is fairly bland. It just is a little bit of red at the top, some gold bands, and it just doesn't have those textures and layers. The same thing with Rocket's costume. It doesn't have any textures and layers like the original costume did. And the Static costume is just one of the worst designs I have seen so far. It's just one big blob of one color, whereas his costume on Static Shock had all of this color and it really popped. And his earlier costume from the comics, it was navy blue and white and gold, and it really popped because he had that yellow raincoat, and that made that costume really pop. I mean, I don't know who's doing the design here, but the costumes really need to be redesigned because a lot of these costumes, they don't have that pop to get people's attention. Because whenever I design a costume like an Isis's costume or Eastbeam's costume or the Cyber Goddess armor, I'm always thinking I want these outfits to really be bold. I really want them to really have a lot of color, and I want these outfits to really stand out so that when people see those outfits, they're like, wow, that outfit really, it just pops. And that's something I wasn't seeing from these really flat and uninspired designs of these new Milestone costumes. I wasn't seeing that pop. I mean, monochrome colors like with Static's costume, it doesn't have that energy to draw your eyes to it. And Icon's costume with all of the color at the top, it doesn't really draw your eyes upwards. And a good costume design is going to draw your eyes upward to the face where everything is, and the symbol to let you know who this is. And I really didn't see that with these costume designs, and I really was disappointed. And I was also disappointed with the way they changed Static's hairstyle to these braids when everybody knows Virgil's dreadlocks are a part of who he is. I mean, Virgil without his dreadlocks isn't Virgil, and Virgil without his locks isn't distinct. I mean, he's just another kid, and that's one of the other problems I had with it was you don't have these characters, again, staying true to their spirit because there are certain things that make these characters who they are, and all of that was practically taken out of these Milestone's Return. Now, this Milestone Returns, I mean, yes, I'm glad these characters are back, but I'm really disappointed in the execution as related to how these characters are being presented, because I'm not really happy about the black culture being stripped away from these characters. I'm not happy about the origins being retconned. I'm not happy about Static's origin, especially because when you take Static away from his motivation for getting these gang members, you take away what made him a hero. What made Virgil Hawkins a hero was his decision to not use that gun, and that was what showed us the difference between him and Biz Money B, aka Hot Streak, and that showed us what made him a hero was on the inside, but they wanted to show, oh, he goes to a Black Lives Matter rally to try to make things modern, when they should have focused on the things that made these characters classic. And the Big Bang was a major part of what made these characters classic, and I didn't like seeing them try to force this identity politics of Black Lives Matter into these characters. It has no place in the Milestone universe. Now, if you wanted to explore different aspects of culture, again, like Black Lives Matter, the place to do that was in a storyline, and the place to do that was by introducing a villain similar to what they did with Commando X in, I believe, Static number 4 and Static number 5. Because in that story called There's a Riot Going On, we saw how this pro-black Commando X was trying to exploit the riot that went on in Dakota. So there were elements there, but what we're seeing a lot with Milestone Returns is a lot of woke. And if they go with this woke, then I see this relaunch of Milestone sadly going the way of Vertigo back in 2018. Now, Vertigo was DC's very innovative division, but because they pushed identity politics, it alienated readers, and those readers didn't come out in large numbers for your Border Town, your High Level, your Hex Wives, and I think there was another book out there. And I would hate to see that happen to Milestone, and that's, again, one of the reasons why I came out and made the video saying I wanted to work for Milestone, because I would want to see these characters presented in a way that, again, keeps them true to the spirit of who they are, makes things fresh for the 21st century, and introduces some story elements that brings that third layer of depth and dimension, and then shows us relationships between the heroes and the villains, and work to get towards building up the rogues galleries of these characters, because these heroes have great potential, but they need the right bad guys to actualize that potential. And this is something that I saw lacking in this whole Milestone Returns 19 pages. We didn't see much focus on making us care about these characters by showing us how we're going to bring back not only the Milestone heroes, but focus on rebuilding the rogues galleries for many of these characters so that we can showcase what makes them formidable foes and what showcases how they will overcome the great challenges. Milestone is back, but Milestone could be better, and I think from this first book there's a lot of work that needs to be done, and I'm hoping that they can get that work done, because if they can get their storytelling straight, they could get this universe back in the hands of the next generation of readers. But if they keep executing like this will go down, sadly, the same way Vertigo fell apart back in 2018. Now, if you want to try some of my SJS Direct books in the SJS Direct universe, like the ISIS series, the E-Steam series, the John Haynes series, and books like the Spinsterella Trilogy and Eternal Night and the Thetas, you can find all of those books on Amazon.com in paperback and Kindle format. You can also find those books on Smashwords, the iBookstore, and Google Play. And if you want to see me make more videos like this, you can donate to my Patreon, my PayPal, and my Cash App by clicking the links in the description box. That's all I have to say for this video. You can comment, rate, and subscribe. Those who refuse the gift of eternal life